President, Global Public Policy and Government Affairs, MasterCard; Vishnu R. Dusad, Co-founder and MD, Nucleus Software; Sue Daly, Director, Tech and Innovation, Tech UK.
Thank you so much, Pragya, and a very good morning to my wonderful panelists. We have a few audience in the room, but we have a lot more online. So I'm looking forward to, yeah, if we can get our, you are here, Ravi, next to me. And Vishnu is just on his way. He should be here shortly. I think the theme of our panel is AI and workforce transformation. And clearly, from a India perspective, the AI is obviously creating a number of opportunities. It's also creating a lot of anxiety amongst the youth. And I think it's important to decode what does AI really mean, and how do we navigate these shifts that are ahead of us. So in terms of structuring the panel, I thought we'll try and break it into three different segments. So the first segment is clearly about what is the disruption and how are we designing for it, right? So try and get perspectives from each of the panelists on how are you seeing this disruption? Are we shaping this disruption, or is this disruption really shaping us? So Kish, if I can start with you maybe, right? From one of the sectors that's most hotly debated is IT services, and you're a leading company in that space. How are you seeing this change for your employees? Do you see software coding now only being done through AI tools? So what is the job of the coder if you look at it? But how real is this disruption, and how are you staying ahead of the shifts that are there?
So I think the direction of travel is indisputable, right? That there is disruption. There's an issue of technology capability, and there's an issue of adoption. And there's always that technology capability leads adoption. Adoption is going to determine workforce displacement or disruption. But the capability, there's no doubt that there's capability that exists today. Actually, there's capability that existed 3 months ago, 6 months ago, where there's quite a large chunk of work that is done by the industry that could potentially be displaced or improved or in some way impacted by AI. What is it that is getting impacted is changing very rapidly. See, if it asked me at the beginning of 24, right, what services will get most impacted? I would have said testing. Actually, I would put BPO first. But I'm saying in tech, I would have put testing first. And I would have put software engineering last. Today, I'll flip that. I'll say software engineering is the most. So the direction of travel, I think.
So you're really saying software engineering is bigger disruption than testing and infra management or other stuff, right?
That is true. So I think whatever disruption we saw, I thought would be there in infra. I think is there, but it's a plateau. I'm not seeing leaps and bounds of change. What we saw as a potential change like a year ago and now is not so different. I think the massive difference is in software engineering.
So if you are a young software professional today, Kish, how do you see, what does this mean for me as that young fresher out of college right now?
So I'll say opportunities for a young, technically savvy person is enormous. Now, there are things they need to think of and do differently for that opportunity to become real for them. Okay? Because the real value of AI is not in reducing headcount in blah functions, okay, whatever it is, whether it's in BPO or some functionals work or software, that's not the real value. The real value is in being able to solve problems that you could not solve before. And I think you need to arm yourself with a completely different set of skills to make that real. But if you do that, I think the opportunities are enormous for a young age.
Thanks, Kish. I'll come back to you. Ravi, if I can come to you, right? MasterCard is, very strong, obviously, in financial services, but you have a very strong data and technology play, right? How are you seeing this workforce disruption? And, for a company like yours, which has a very large GCC in India, what are the different kind of skill sets that you're thinking about today?
Sure. No, so, thank you very much, and thanks to NASSCOM, and great to be here on the panel with Sue and Sri Krishna. So I think, a lot of change, right, over the last 2 decades. When I look at our industry, so I guess if you look at it, like all the professionals in privacy, cybersecurity, data protection, technology risk, right? They've all been enablers of digital transformation, right? They have, create what we enjoy today in terms of digital empowerment and the ability, let's say, talking from a payment lens, very seamless in terms of wherever in the world you are, right? All that is riding on trust, right? And there's a lot that goes in, to build that trust, right? So now we are seeing is artificial intelligence, AI is being embedded into a kind of decision-making, public infrastructure, service delivery, right, and governance. So it's no longer kind of a downstream compliance function as such. So so I think that's why we need, the shift is in kind of the fintech disruption that came about before. I think what we are seeing a bigger shift that AI is bringing in terms of the kind of skill sets that are required. So so to your question on what kind of skills are required, right? I think the skills I would say is that the the capability for system level judgment is needed. So what we mean by that is that are you able to take what outputs are coming from AI, and you need to have the capability to understand, is the model drifting, and in high stakes and regulated industry like ours, it becomes essential because decisions scale very instantly, and as do the systemic errors, right, and the impact of those errors if left unchecked. So I think that it's important to have that system level judgment. Then interdisciplinary fluency is important because the AI challenges are not just technical, right? They are at the intersection of engineering, of regulation, of risk, user behavior. So if we have professionals who are across those domains, right, that's important, and to have that interdisciplinary approach rather than working in silos as such. Then it comes to a need for a very continuous learning mindset because the AI systems are evolving with data, right, and the workforce needs to evolve that too, and the ability to learn from live environments, right, what's happening, to adapt models, kind of to be able to refine the decision making. So that's important. So system level judgment, interdisciplinary fluency, continuous learning mindset, and I think last but not the least is a deep contextual awareness is needed. Now, in a country like ours in India, multiple languages, dialects, informal systems. So if an AI agent is interacting with the user, the question is, does it understand the context and the intent and the kind of the real life realities, or is it just a language, right? So because the context is shaped by how models are being trained, which means that engineers have to consciously design for it. So that contextual ability and awareness is very important.
So the typical engineer who was the coder as we knew it obviously has to build a very differentiated set of skills is what you're really talking about, right? So understanding interdisciplinary learning, understanding context, the ability to continuously learn, I think that in itself is becoming a skill. So clearly, I think there's a lot of change that is needed at a college level and school level on how, even how you're learning so that you are ready for this very, very changing world. So if I can come to you, right, how are you, you represent Tech UK here, how are you seeing the AI disruption in the UK workforce? Is there anxiety? Is there opportunities that you are seeing? And how are you as an organization and of course the UK government supporting this transition that's taking place?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sagi. That's a question in a panel all in itself, but I'll try and touch on all of them. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to be part of the summit. Just to say to everybody, you've done an amazing job, so thank you. But also to this really important panel discussion. And it is absolutely a discussion that we're having in the UK. And what I found really useful this week, if I can be slightly selfish for a moment, is to listen to the conversations that you guys are having here and the other global people that are here at the summit, and to kind of compare notes. Are we having the same conversations? Are we facing the same kind of issues? I think what I've just heard from my fellow panelists are some of the conversations that are happening in the UK. Yes, there is change. Yes, there is disruption happening. And to your point, absolutely, what we're seeing is a lot of roles, not just in our industry and sector, but across industries and sectors, moving from, very much admin tasks, very much cognitive tasks. Those are being increasingly automated, but then that's freeing people up to do more problem solving and to look at more client advisory, governance, and using and being able to shift those skills to look at AI governance, but also I would say client facing as well, which goes to your point around skills. I'll come back to your broader question, but yes, it's technical, yes, it's governance, it's looking at other skills, but it's also those people skills, those human skills. If we are shifting people, if jobs are shifting towards more of, yes, this automation can do the job, but what's the added value that I can provide, and it's my human skills, which sounds very weird to say human skills, but you know what I mean, it's that ability to interact, it's that more social skills. Then are we teaching those as well as the technical, as well as the legal, the governance, as well as the software, as well as the technical skills? Are we also teaching people and the young people coming through how to interact with people as well if they're more client-facing? So absolutely, the disruption, we're feeling it in the UK. We're having that discussion in the UK. Definitely in the industry is questioning, well, what will my role be? Where will I sit? Government is, in the UK, is focusing very squarely on this. So as part of its AI Opportunities Action Plan, the UK government had created an AI skills partnership, bringing together the government bodies that are looking at how do we upskill, how do we retrain, how do we get society ready for this next wave of AI that's coming, not just the one we have now, but the one that's coming down the line. And bringing together with companies and bodies such as Tech UK and others to look at how do we do this in collaboration. So how do we reach the wider population? I'm not just thinking our industry here, but the wider society and population with what are the training courses, what are the upskilling courses, what are the opportunities to learn and gain skills to thrive in an AI world. But then also how do we train our industry and sector for the shift that is happening as well. I think generally, and that task force is looking to train over 1 million people in AI so that we can help the greater population be ready for working in this era. I think there is anxiety, I think there is concern. Some workers understandably worrying about displacement, worrying about if they're at high exposure to automation, what does that mean? How do they shift? How do they move? But I think what we are looking at is how do you turn, and this is a word I've heard a lot about this week, how do you turn that anxiety into agency? How do we encourage people to take a lead, to take what they've learned, but as you said, continuous learning, continuous upskilling, because that is what you will need to thrive in this world. But I think what we're looking at in terms of helping people do that, it's through restructured training, reskilling programs, its pathways for mid-career into new careers. One of the very interesting initiatives that the UK government introduced was around how people coming out of university that might not have an AI degree can do a one-year conversion course to become then able to work in the AI industry. So I think there are lots of, and perhaps we'll go into a little bit more, there are lots of different initiatives that the UK are doing which could be applicable here, and vice versa. We want to learn from how you're addressing this. But I think there is anxiety, but it's then how do you turn that into opportunity and agency?
No. And, one of the issues in India we keep talking with the government is that we have a very disaggregated focus right now within India, right? There are multiple governments, multiple state governments, organizations like NASSCOM. We're all trying to do some part of the pie, but there is no, if I can use that word, whole of government or whole of country approach, right? On saying, this is how, if this is such a big disruption, this is how we will go about doing it. Do you see that in the UK, that there is a integrated approach, and then obviously every actor has their own role to play in that?
I think it's coming. First of all, I don't think there's a silver bullet. I don't think there's one pure answer, because the moment, as you said, things are moving rapidly and quickly. The moment you put in a task force or initiative, it may very quickly need to shift and need to change. So I think in all of these, and AI generally, having an iterative, flexible approach that can adapt and shift as technology evolves and as new developments evolve is really, really key. So I think the AI Skills Partnership, which we've signed up to with the UK government, has really kind of become a bit of a cornerstone, a bit of a nucleus of how do we retrain, how do we upskill the general population. But then I think there's also the conversation about how are we ensuring our schools, our education curriculum, what young people are learning in schools, how is that joined up to the AI revolution? And I think while there's some thinking there, I think that could be more joined up. And then, yes, of course, on the how are we training the industry? How are we getting people leaving, as you said, there's freshers leaving universities with the skills that we need as industry? Tech UK is part of Tech UK is an organisation called Tech Skills. Go and check them out, not right now, but maybe afterwards. And Tech Skills works directly with employers, directly with technology companies and universities. So we be that bridge between the two, to make sure that industry, employers can provide input into the university, the courses, what they're teaching students, so that when they come out of university, they have a degree. It's called a Tech Skills Gold Accreditation degree, which means employers will recognize that degree and kind of go, yes, you've got what I need, come and work for me. So there's no one single answer to this. I think it's a number of initiatives that need to work together, but as Tech UK, as others, we're trying really, really hard to join the dots. But I think the Tech Skills addresses what do employers need from universities? How do we get universities and employers working more closely together? What role can government do? And what can government do that industry can't? And vice versa, what can industry do that government can't? It's really got to be a partnership and a collaboration. But there's no one, I think, single initiative that will, in my view, that will fix this or solve this or address this.
Yeah, I think that's probably a great way to think about it, that there's just so many changes that there's no single silver bullet, like you said. You really got to figure out a way how you tie the different threads, but let maybe 1,000 flowers bloom, because that's the nature of what we are dealing with,
and
right?
then if you can bring it together and say, here's our coordinated approach, I definitely think in the UK we could join up more these initiatives, and maybe India with your scale can do that. You've definitely brought the world together in the summit, so I have no doubt that you can definitely do that.
Wonderful. So Keech, if I can come back to you, right? Again, from an IT services perspective, we've been always one of the largest employers for the engineering talent in this country. Now, with the new skills that Ravi talked about, do you see this focus will be largely on more elite, top-tier institutions and a large volume of students that were probably studying in Tier 2, Tier 3 colleges across the country and had a phenomenal career in our industry? We are closing out opportunities for them?
I want to make a point on your previous question, and then I'll address this. Okay. While, and I agree there's no silver bullet. Okay. However, I'll say that, I live in the US, the conversation I hear about policy around AI is, should we regulate, should we not regulate? Who should regulate? Should it be the state? Should it be the central government? I'm not hearing what I heard here, okay, which is a big focus on inclusiveness. And so I think while, you know, it may not have all of the country, I think it's still a very material difference in approach of how government, I see here, is thinking about. And actually, I heard that from the UK IT Minister day before. I heard from President Macron yesterday in the plenary session. So I think there's a big difference in some of countries relative to at least what I'm hearing in the US, much more focused on how to make it work for everyone, how to make it inclusive, which I think is a huge difference in, I think it lead to a very material difference in outcomes over a period of time. Okay. Now, coming back to your question, okay. So first, you know, do I know all the answers? No, okay. But here are some things, some pieces that I think are going to be, that are true. Okay. First, I think I've seen young AI native talent is much better at many things than taking somebody even who's in their 30s and trying to retrain them. It's much like, you know, do you use Instagram? I don't, actually, you know, but there are kids who are grown up with it, right? So I think it's the same difference. The digital native, I think you're going to see an AI native generation. And we find, actually, like last year, there's like a set of people we hire from the absolute top engineering schools like IITs. We had them train our management team on vibe coding in May last year, because vibe coding back then was brand new. And guess who the kids were the best in it in the company? The people who came out of college right there in the best. So we had them train us. So I think this part is going to be true, right? Whenever we think of pyramid, we have to bear in mind that sometimes the best talent is the youngest one that is coming. Okay? The second one that's going to be true is, I think ultimately the new opportunities created by AI is going to far greater than the number of jobs that it could reduce. Now, there's going to be a period where, you know, there is a transition period, and I'm not sure exactly, you know, how it will play out, but I'm very confident that ultimately AI is going to do so many more things that will need building applications, building tech for, right? And I think, however, I think the third is also true, that for kids, the problem to solve is not tech. It's not coding. It's not, you know, creating data structures or whatever it is that kids are trying to solve. I think that's a solved problem by some of the tech, by AI. So now you got to think of what problems that you want to solve, which is something else, which is where the big opportunity is.
So Keech, I'm going to hold you to that, where you said AI will create more jobs than it changes. So we'll see how that plays out. But, you know, one of the conversations I was having with another IT services company, and they were like, this AI native talent is great, but that talent will have never learned to, you know, work without AI. Yeah. And does that mean that some of your foundational and core skills will not be as solid as they were in the past, because this is the world you've grown up with, and your dependence on these tools will be so high that does it lead to a lack of some foundational skills also, right?
Listen, there was a time when coding you had to do in C++, right? And then there were, the whole evolution of coding, as an example, has been abstracting what you need to code for to something, right? So you didn't have IDEs like I don't know how many years ago, right? But you code, who codes without an IDE now? Nobody, right? And that's been true for whatever, a decade. So I think that same question will come, who codes now? And I don't think anybody will code. Okay, that'll be a solved problem. So no. Is it going to be a disadvantage? I think far from it. I think it's going to become a significant advantage. I think the cost of coding is going to become zero. Cost of code is going to become zero. What that means is you can solve any number of problems with code that you couldn't solve for before because it is too complex or too expensive to do so. Okay. So absolutely not. I think it's going to be a big advantage.
So you have a comment to make on this, and I'll then come to Ravi and ask his input. So
No, really fascinating. I think just on the coding point, you're absolutely right. And I'm just thinking as a woman in tech as well, we had a big focus in the UK of getting girls into coding. Brilliant. But actually, well, now why, right? But there is also an opportunity there, but there's also a risk. So coding, AI for coding, great. But we will need somebody to check the code, right? So again, it's that shifting and that moving of skills. And then my brain went to, okay, well, the people that were doing the code, could we reskill them into checking the code and going more into governance? But then my brain goes to, but hang on, but AI might be able to check the code quicker than a human can. But then you get to that point of, okay, well, somebody then needs to check that the AI has checked the code correctly. So there is, if you're baking in governance and assurance in AI, humans will need to be in the loop. So how can people in the coding world be shifted in their role, shifted to help more on the governance side? I did have another point. However, my jet-lag brain means I've forgotten it, so I'll give way.
But if you've never coded in your life, how do you know what to check for?
Oh, I remembered my point. That's kind of related in a way to the gentleman from MasterCard was saying about context, and the completely important context is really, really key. And something that is in my brain as well is that people that work in organizations over the last couple of years, they have, done junior roles, they've learnt the company, they've learnt the sector, they've learnt the industry, they've kind of done the grunt work, to learn the context and learn what's important. What concerns me slightly is that people coming in using AI not using AI, but when do we give them time to learn the company? When do we give them time to learn the context? Are they getting exposed to, when I first started it in a company, I started in the basement, I worked my way up, but I knew my sector, I knew my industry, I knew that background, I knew that context. I knew what I was checking and why. So if automation takes those junior roles away, how are we teaching people? How are people getting exposed to the context and what a fintech industry needs and what it looks like? If those opportunities which came through more junior roles are now no longer there. So I think there's huge opportunities here, but there's also some rethinking we need to do as an industry and a sector of, are we skilling people with the right things for what the industry needs going forward as well?
So Ravi, if you want to go both on the question on, we have 1 million+ engineers graduating every year. What are the jobs for them? And, obviously you've talked about the skills they need, but will we today tech jobs are not just in the tech industry, they are in every sector. Yeah. But what do you see as the opportunity for them? And secondly, this whole part about, right, what will humans do if AI does all the coding?
What would humans
What would humans do, or the engineer do, if AI is going to do all the coding, right?
Okay. So look, I think couple of, I'll give you where, at least from a MasterCard perspective, how we are, adapting and, in the workplace to, I think the latter part of your question, right? So I think that if we look at, to Shri, your point around inclusion and, to going up to the last mile, I think it's very, very absolutely a necessity, and you've hit it nailed right on the head, because India, operate. It's a unique combination of scale and diversity that we have in India, right? Multiple languages, multiple jurisdictions, multiple levels of government, right? And technology that's evolving and so forth. So I think that so there are certain shifts that are happening in the workforce or need to happen, and as we continue to adapt, if that where traditional compliance models, which are built around static rules and periodic audits, they don't serve us well in today's day and time. So the workforce of the future has to shift, from a rule enforcement to a system-wide stewardship role, like how data flows, how operational controls shape risk over time, and when to intervene, right? And then I think we have to make governance interdisciplinary and influential. So, which is requiring fluency, for people and putting teams together along law, technology, ethics, operations, and like I mentioned before, privacy, AI, governance, they cannot operate only in silos, right? So the, so the future readiness kind of requires a big structural change in design, in procurement design, deployment, right? And we also have to close the uneven digital capability across institutions. And I think, we talked about that, if there are central agencies and large enterprises can attract talent, right, while smaller cannot. So that will create governance gaps and governance gaps, especially where AI is expanding the most, right? So, and those are risks that we need to make sure that we have the right solutions or the right thought process, because it is around going beyond kind of elite specialization towards more of a broad-based AI digital literacy. So at MasterCard, what we do is, I think that, we have spent, several of our last years operationalizing responsible AI, right? And not just as a policy exercise, but as a workforce and capability challenge. Now, we have a very formal established AI governance framework. We have a chief AI and data governance officer. We have a chief privacy officer, and we have a privacy by design approach into everything. And these ensure that AI risks are addressed before systems are built and deployed, and not afterwards.
And not after
right?
that, yeah.
So, and we have an AI governance team that is working horizontally across data science, product, legal, compliance, engineering, right? Because that, knowing that how important that integration layer is, right? Because we have, and then the product and engineering leaders, you could say they are the first line stewards of risk and AI risk, right? They are not kind of the recipients of compliance decisions. They are the stewards up front. But that happens when you get that right integration, up front. So I think that, for us, from a MasterCard perspective, what we have learned that governing AI at scale, it's fundamentally a workforce challenge that requires interdisciplinary skills, right? And early integration is required into product design, and we need kind of governance professionals who can manage risk and not just enforce rules. But I think that's, so it is a privacy by design, security by design. Those are kind of core principles. But then how do you bring those teams together in this evolving, is important.
And I think that's a fascinating part of this conversation, right? The whole focus on ethics, principles, trust, security, privacy by design, right? And as you think about, Ravi, going back to this large student workforce, right, that we are building for tomorrow, how do we get them to imbibe many of these principles? Obviously, when they come into your organizations, there's structured programs that you're running to drive this thinking. But if we had to take this back to the whole college university ecosystem, any recommendations do you have on how to drive that?
I think, no, absolutely. So clearly, from a corporation perspective, I think, I was looking at this morning when I took a picture of that. I think when I, opened the news this morning, the very first thing on the TV was around, the headlines were AI skills or skill gap, right? Which was and a lot of discussion based on obviously this week of what's happening at the, as part of this summit, right? So, and I think that, clearly the role that business, academia, government, right, we all have a role to play in navigating this workforce transition. I think for corporations, it's not just enough to say you're offering internships, right, to students. I personally feel, how are we taking our maybe chief learning officers or other or engineers kind of who are at the front line, how are they working with people in academia and actually helping think through and design courses based on real world examples of and situations that are coming, then and certainly obviously when people come and do internships, it helps them get that exposure, take that back into their learning environment. But I think in the whole facet of curriculum and curriculum design is changing, where it needs, it should not be only restricted only to computer science majors, but I think that this is something that is required, in terms of AI in its every different form across a broad set of disciplines, right? So it's not something that we can leave it only for, computer science majors, per se. So I think that in terms of priorities, embedding AI governance and interdisciplinary collaboration into, is one of the very first layers that we have to begin with. So that, the people coming in, as you talked about, the engineers, they're trained to think across the full life cycle of AI system, and not just in a very siloed approach, right? And that is what we talked about, bringing engineers, product, risk, policy, all of those, together. And, then I think another priority is, I know we talk about it and we have to think, focus on role redesigning and not just reskilling. And I think that, because AI is transforming tasks within jobs rather than eliminating, roles entirely. So I think that the work, we have to see is how do we kind of redesign roles rather than only focusing on reskilling, right? And we have to build inclusive and distributed talent pipelines. So I think here, I go back to CII, and other organizations where we have worked with, where you go on the field and you're working, let us say, with MSMEs, right? And, working with the last mile, understanding their challenges and their pain points, and bringing that into our product design and, end output that's required, and because that provides the context, right? So I think that, the ability to take our talent pipeline and expose them to real world and helping them contextualize, is very, very important.
Yeah, thank you. Kish, if I can follow up that question with you, right? I think Ravi spoke about two themes. One is role redesign. So how are you seeing the role redesign happen from a technology services context? And secondly, I think there's so much we hear about the changing role of the engineer. Now this whole forward deployed engineers becoming like the new buzzword in town. How are you seeing this happen in your organization?
Specifically on role redesign, that is absolutely true. Just again, going back to software engineering, if you think of a typical kind of squad that builds software, it may have had, whatever, 7, 8, 10 people, some developers, some testers, scrum master, typical roles. I think in the extreme case, we're seeing down to 3 people. 1 product owner, 1 developer, 1 tester. And that's substantial redesign of the role. And the time it takes to do it is coming down from 2 weeks to 2 days. So yes, you won't see value unless you are redesigning the role. You won't see real value from AI. Now, we've been speaking a lot about capabilities, right? I think we should spend enough time on adoption. And I think there is a pretty big gap. And actually, I think that gap is good for workforce. Okay? Because no matter what the capabilities are, I think by the time it becomes real adopted at scale into workforce, into our enterprise customers, it's several years. In aggregate, ultimately, I think of the impact of work and hence workforce is maybe in low single-digit percentages per year at most, even 1 to 2% right now. Maybe that'll expand to 2 to 3 next year. This is because of the speed of adoption and the multiple constraints in adoption. Because I don't think AI knows context, right? Everybody's speaking enough about it, like, mad could mean what the word mad means for one enterprise. It could mean the old world for Chennai in another enterprise, right? So how there are many reasons why adoption, I think, is going to be slow, and frankly, one of the reasons is role redesign, because it is not as simple as getting a coding toy or whatever latest tool. It is an organizational redesign to make that happen.
And are you engaged in enabling all your employees to be able to use these tools, given some of the issues around governance risks that are being talked about?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I think it is kind of a little bit silly to tell employees that you cannot use. We are already in the second generation of retraining our employees on AI. I think first generation was whatever, on Gen AI, and I would say even as of Jan last year, the whole concept of agentic came in. Whatever you learned till that point becomes useless. And so we're doing that second generation of training now. What we found is that earlier we used to mandate training. We wanted everybody to learn. And we were pushing employees to learn. Suddenly we stopped it. We said, hey, it's up to you. The truth is, if you don't learn, you're going to be redundant. Okay. Yeah, so it's not for us that you're learning, it's for you. And suddenly we're finding that the number of people who are actually getting trained is more, not less, once you stopped mandating it. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, are there privacy risks with Facebook? Do people use it? The answer for both is yes. Okay, so I think you're just going to find a generation of people who think about the risks associated very differently.
So, yesterday at the Impact Summit, the CEO of Anthropic spoke about, I think, what was the 100x geniuses in a data center, right? That's the kind of intelligence at scale that will exist as these technologies really mature to a deployment, and the scale, the deployment gap. How do you see the role of humans shifting, and what is this human AI collaboration that we are all talking about, right?
See, the thing is this, okay, I tell my customers this. Stop chasing the shiniest object. There is always going to be advancement in technology every month, every 2 months, every 3 months. Something better will come. And in the quest to keep chasing that, actually what you're doing is not realizing value from anything. So for me, most enterprises can get significant value if they fully adopt systematically capabilities that existed a year ago. Certainly capabilities that existed 6 months ago. So what are the relevance of a data center full of geniuses for most enterprises? I think it's zero. Okay. What problems can it solve that enterprises... I think enterprise problems are not to do with IQ. It is far more complex than a linear IQ issue, right? So I think, yes, it may be true that AI can do like 1,000 things that humans can't, but it's not relevant. Okay. So I think the real focus is not about capability, about How do you help enterprise adopt? And that is the real answer to your earlier question. What do people do if machines do coding? Actually, the problem you're trying to solve is not writing code. You're trying to always solve for some other problem. And I think that's the reskilling that engineers and young talent need to go through. That for me now, AI knowledge is like English. It's foundational. It's fundamental. I need to be in the business of solving for something else. And there I think the point that you've made several times, interdisciplinary, I think is crucial, right? So, I mean, how many times do you go to a doctor and get frustrated? Listen, I don't want an eye doctor. I don't want a nose doctor. I actually want a doctor, right? And, you know, that's true in engineering. You think about robotics. You don't want a mechanical engineer, you don't want a software engineer, you don't want an AI engineer, you don't want an electrical engineer. You want an engineer. And I think that is where our talent needs to go. Now, frankly, I think academia has a big job to do to help them get there, because our courses are not designed like this right now. They're designed as electrical and whatever else. But I think young talent who are reorienting themselves that, hey, AI is not the skill, AI is very foundational, but I'm going to use that to solve for something more meaningful. I think we'll just be fine on workforce.
Yeah. So if I can come to you, right, I think you've heard a lot about how learning has to change, and you know, whether it's critical thinking that we're talking about, problem solving, experiential, use case based, but at the same time you need access to data, you need access to compute, you need access to research, right? So how is UK thinking about this, and you know, are there examples that India can learn from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about realizing the opportunities, economic and social opportunities of AI, it isn't just about, obviously, skills. Skills is part of it, but it's about it getting, if I can use that word again, the foundations right. So in the UK, particularly last year, we've focused a lot around, and a lot of initiatives, a lot of investment has been put into getting the infrastructure right. So whether that is looking at our data infrastructure, the UK government announcing a national data library initiative to try and, we have, well, I was about to say we have huge data sets, but you guys have massive data sets. But the data sets we have, how are we using them? How are we bringing them together? Not just for public services and public sector use, but potentially for industry use as well. So data infrastructure, absolutely. A lot of investments gone into compute infrastructure, so the creation of AI growth zones, so dedicated areas in the UK where perhaps we don't have the compute infrastructure resource right now. How are we building that? Part of it is also investment got into AIR, so an AI research resource, so dedicated computer resource, compute power chips, to allow AI researchers at that fundamental research level to do the work that they're doing as well. So absolutely a lot of focus, and I think if I think about and if I reflect on the last, 2025 in the UK, yes, the conversation was a lot about how do we get the foundations right, how are we getting the infrastructure right. Where I think and where I want the conversation to shift is to now adoption. Yes, we've been talking about adoption. There is already adoption happening in the UK, whether it's financial services, whether it's in our healthcare system, whether it's transport, logistics, but boy, there's so much potential. Completely agree. And at Tech UK, we're really looking at how do we accelerate that AI adoption at pace and speed in a way that we don't get it wrong. So from a governance, from an ethics, from a responsible, from a regulation point of view, absolutely. And how do we get it right for people? But how do we move quickly enough to realize the opportunity? And that's really, really something that we'll be advocating for more this year. Because, so, again, what can government do to help that? But what can we as industry, and particularly the tech industry, help other sectors and industries to understand how they can do that as well? And that's really a core mission of my work at Tech UK. Skills comes into it, of course, but also does public trust and confidence, right? None of what we're talking about here is going to really fly if people don't trust and have confidence in using AI. So there is, or having AI used about them, right? So there's lots of initiatives happening, compute infrastructure, absolutely, access to data, making sure that researchers have what they need, industry have what they need, SMEs have what they need. But skills is an integral part of that. It's all linked, right? It's all connected. But I completely agree. Adoption is really the key. And I was at a UK, had a reception last night at the High Commission, and the Rishi Sunak, the previous Prime Minister, was talking about which country will win the AI race. We're talking about sovereignty, and we're talking about, you know, and the previous panel was talking about sovereignty as kind of key for India, and it's key for a lot of countries, and we're looking at what does data, what does tech, what does AI sovereignty mean for the UK. But Rishi Sunak's point was like the countries that will win the race in AI are not the countries that are looking at sovereignty or looking at stack or looking at infrastructure. It's the countries that can demonstrate adoption and can win the race on adoption, and that can integrate AI across all the sectors and across all your industry and your economy. And definitely in the UK, we're very much tying AI adoption and deployment diffusion into society, into our economy, as a key driver of growth and productivity as well. So lots going on, but with that central core theme of how do we get this right as well.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think getting deployment right is really the opportunity or challenge for economies that are not competing for the LLMs, right? So I think that's what India has to get right, because AI can help solve, to Keisha's point, the shiniest toy is not needed for the enterprise. It's needed to solve India's deep healthcare challenges. It's needed to solve some of our agriculture-related issues, right? And I think that's where the whole inclusion focus and what AI can do for you really means.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we have to take a step back and just realize how transformational, how exciting this technology is. I mean, many of us have been talking about this for a number of years, but where we are in terms of compute infrastructure and compute power that we never had before, in terms of the digital data and the data sets that we've never really had before. I don't know, I'm feeling quite, this does feel like a step change. This does feel like a different moment in time. And it's how do we grasp that moment in time, which I think is really important. Now, how do we help young people and everybody working on an industry to understand what grasping this opportunity means for them as well?
No, I think we're reaching the end of our session, but I just want to get to the last session and quick comments from all of you, right? What would be, Ravi, your top 3 priorities for business, academia, and government to successfully navigate this AI workforce transition? And, what are some risks it should plan for?
So I think, the priorities, I think I mentioned, to you about this whole interdisciplinary collaboration, the whole, aspect around redesign and so forth, right? And I think in risks, I would also see I think if I go to, what we've been talking around AI and how it has democratized access and so forth, right? But there is also the concentration risk that we have to be aware about, right? Because kind of when we have a small set of institutions or companies or talent pools pull ahead disproportionately because they have access to better data or compute and research ecosystems, right? Then I think we have to be very deliberate in how we design for systems. And I think this is where, India, we have a position of strength because our engineers, and you talked about the 1 million+ engineers that are, we are coming from a position of strength because India has contributed to the global technology revolution. You look at all the growth of our global capability centers, kind of reflect that depth of the talent pool, that exists, right? But I think that we have to, as we go forward, get that, design aspect right? Because foundational digital and AI literacy into school curriculum right? Because equitable access to tools, infrastructure, right? Hands-on exposure across geographies, right? So, and then also we have to go beyond top tier institutions to tier 2 and tier 3, because otherwise, again, we'll come back to a concentration risk, that will exist. And, because we don't need just people who can build AI, we need folks, and professionals who can build with AI, who can govern AI, and who can, and know when to override AI, right? So I think that's kind of important. So, and we have to make sure that in terms of risk, we don't go towards over-automation, without adequate human oversight. Biases need to be taken into account, because it should work well for both formal workers as well as informal workers, right? Women entrepreneurs, vernacular, because, and we talked about context and the contextual aspect of it, right? So, otherwise we risk exclusion at scale. And, to Shree's point, we want that inclusion that you talked about, and I already talked about the...
I'm sorry, we know we are ending the session, so whoever's ringing the bell, please, we'll be there on time.
Yeah, okay. So therefore, I'll just conclude there that, it is about this transformation that we need is about preparing people, to use AI in a responsible, ethical manner that also drives social impact.
Yeah. So I think you articulated it very well, right? The risk of concentration, the risk of exclusion, and obviously not doing it very thoughtfully, right? So I think those are very, very well articulated. So if I can come to you, right, what do you see both as from a workforce transition frameworks, what are our big opportunities and risks, right? So.
Yeah, I'm glad you could hear that bell as well. I thought it was only in my head. So the question in terms of priorities, so very quickly for businesses, so touching on some of the points Rahul, you were making as well, embed lifelong learning. We need to continuous learn. We all do actually, but also our organisations. I think about for businesses, not just jobs and roles, but tasks. What are organisations looking for people to do? And I think also organisations need to think about the opportunities, but the risks. They need to invest in human skills along with technical skills, governance skills. But for government as well, we see something in the UK that we think should be prioritised, and I don't know if this will resonate with here in India, but it's an interoperability of skills credentials. So if I get a credential, if we're focusing on lifelong learning, if I learn a skill, if I take a course, if I have a credential, how is that transferable? Can that be recognised elsewhere? Because people will need to shift and people will need to move. But also a national taxonomy of skills and perhaps requirements and fundamental foundational skills that we're talking about. Are we all talking the same language? Are we all talking about the same skills? Some priorities there, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so a new skills taxonomy and interoperability of skills, I think that's going to be very important in this environment where technology is changing so fast, right? Because what was applicable last year is not going to be applicable this year. Keech, if we can come back to you for the closing comments, how are you seeing this?
So I'll maybe just say one thing, okay?
Sorry.
I think inclusiveness has to be by
ending,
design.
so. Yeah. Okay, we're just ending. We said that we are ending. It's just 24 seconds, right? So, yeah, why don't you just close, Keech?
If you look at the internet, it's very inclusive. That's because academia made something free. I think we need academia to do that for AI. That's how it will become more inclusive. And I think this has to be a huge priority.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've ended right on time, and we'd appreciate not getting so many interruptions. But thank you so much, Ravi, Keech, and Sue. Really appreciate this discussion. I do see Vishnu at the back, but I think because he was caught in the traffic, he couldn't join us. Vishnu, we missed you here, but thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much. May I kindly request Sangeeta ma'am to hand over that momentum?
to welcome you all today for our session, Reimagining AI and STEM Education for India's Next Generation. Celebrating the vision of Viksit Bharat and its grandeur, we are witnessing the AI revolution during the AI India Summit. With a young population and vibrant digital ecosystem and strong policy momentum, we are uniquely positioned to harness AI not only for the economic